They watched in horror. Humans abruptly stormed out of the assembly. The assembly hall was massive, unlike any structure the humans had ever seen. It was a grand place, with high ceilings that stretched far above, decorated with strange, glowing lights that floated without wires. The walls were made of a smooth material that seemed to shimmer, and the floor was soft underfoot, like walking on clouds. Alien representatives from different corners of the galaxy filled the room, each species more different than the last. Some had multiple arms, others had tentacles, and there were even beings that looked like energy. The air buzzed with conversations in languages that humans could hardly understand, a mix of deep rumbling sounds and high-pitched clicks. At the front of the hall, a long table stretched out, its surface covered with strange symbols that humans couldn't read. Behind it, the leaders of each species sat, towering over the humans who were positioned near the middle of the room. Captain Jake Carter, the leader of the human delegation, stood tall and straight, his uniform sharp and clean. He had seen many battles, faced countless dangers, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. This assembly was supposed to mark the beginning of humanity's rise as a respected member of the galactic community. But instead, Jake felt more like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. Jake glanced at his fellow humans sitting around the table. Grace Mitchell, a strong-willed woman with a sharp mind, sat beside him. Grace was the human representative to the alien councils, a role she had earned through years of diplomatic work. Across from her sat Lucas Hayes, the strategist of their team. Lucas was the quiet one, always thinking a few steps ahead, his eyes constantly moving, analyzing every word and gesture in the room. The three of them, along with a small group of other humans, had come to this assembly in the hopes of forging important alliances. They had come to show the galaxy that humanity was capable of contributing to the future of interstellar peace. But so far, things were not going well. The discussions had been going on for hours, and each word seemed to push humanity further away from the respect they had hoped to earn. The alien leaders were talking in circles, dismissing the humans with every word. It was clear to Jake that they saw humanity as a young and inexperienced species, still struggling to find its place in the stars. One of the alien leaders, a creature named Zecor, had just finished speaking. He was an ancient being, his skin a deep shade of green with smooth ridges running down his back. His eyes, large and unblinking, stared down at the human delegation as if they were insignificant. "Your species is young," Zecor said in a deep voice that seemed to reverberate in the room. "You are still learning how to survive in the harshness of space. Do you really believe you have anything to offer to the future of the galaxy?" Jake felt a tight knot in his stomach. The way Zecor spoke, it was as if humanity didn't belong here, as if they were just an afterthought in a galaxy that had already seen countless ages of civilization. But Jake knew better. Humanity had survived wars, diseases, and countless other challenges. They had made their way to the stars not through strength alone, but through determination, innovation, and the willingness to face the unknown. He looked over at Grace, who was sitting calmly, her eyes fixed on the alien leader. Grace didn't show her emotions as much as Jake did, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. He knew she felt the same way. They had worked so hard to be here, to be taken seriously, and yet here they were, being treated like children. "Captain Carter," Zecor continued, his voice dripping with condescension, "what makes you think humanity has earned the right to speak here? You've barely managed to hold your own against your own kind, let alone the rest of the galaxy." Jake clenched his fists, but he stayed silent. This was not the time to respond with anger. He had to stay calm, had to show that humans could be dignified, even in the face of insults. But inside, he felt a fire rising in him. These aliens didn't understand humanity's spirit, its will to survive and thrive, no matter the odds. It wasn't about how long they had been in the galaxy. It was about the fire in their hearts and the ability to adapt and learn faster than anyone could imagine. Grace leaned toward him, her voice barely a whisper. "We have to say something, Jake. If we let them keep talking down to us, we'll never be respected." Jake nodded, his jaw tight. He knew she was right, but he had to choose his words carefully. This was not just a diplomatic meeting. It was a test of humanity's strength, and he couldn't afford to fail. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. Before he could speak, another delegate, a tall being with translucent wings and skin that shimmered like liquid metal, spoke up. "Perhaps it would be best if the humans remained silent," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "You are still learning how to function in a galaxy of this scale. We don't want to waste time on your misunderstandings." Jake's fists tightened even more, and Grace shot him a quick glance. This was it. He had to speak now or he'd regret it forever. He stood up abruptly, the movement sharp and quick, causing a few of the alien delegates to look up in surprise. The murmurs around the room stopped for a moment, all eyes on him. Jake's voice rang out, stronger than he had intended. "Enough," he said, his words echoing through the room. "We are human, and we've earned the right to be here. We may be new to this galaxy, but we are not weak, and we are not afraid of your judgment. We have survived the most unimaginable horrors and come out stronger. Do not mistake our youth for weakness." The room was silent. All the alien delegates, from the ancient Z-Corps to the Shimmering Wing delegate, looked at him in stunned silence. Grace sat up straighter, Lucas's eyes narrowed as he studied the room, but Jake was focused only on the alien leaders. "You talk about the history of your species," Jake continued, his voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. "But we have our own history. A history of overcoming the odds, of surviving what no one else thought possible. We've fought wars, conquered planets, and faced death itself. And we're still standing. Do you think that counts for nothing?" He paused, letting his words sink in. "We're not here to beg for your respect. We're here because we deserve to be here. We've made it this far, and we will make it even further. And if you cannot see that, then perhaps we don't need your approval to move forward." Grace's hand brushed against his, and she gave him a subtle nod, her lips pressed into a tight line. Lucas's gaze softened, though his focus never wavered. Jake had said what needed to be said, but the room had grown tense. The alien delegates had expected the humans to remain quiet, to cower beneath their superior technology and age-old wisdom. But Jake had shown them that humanity was not afraid to stand up for itself. Z-Corps was the first to speak again, his voice low and menacing. "You dare speak to us like this? You are not welcome here." Jake held his ground, his eyes burning with defiance. "You may not welcome us, but we're not leaving, and we're not asking for your permission either. We will forge our own path, and one day you'll see. You'll see what humanity can truly do." The room was silent for a moment longer, the weight of Jake's words hanging in the air. He could feel the eyes of every alien delegate upon him, judging, weighing, and measuring. But he didn't flinch. This was his moment and humanity's moment to show the galaxy that they had a place among the stars. And if the galaxy wasn't ready to accept them, well, humanity would carve out its own place. The fire inside Jake burned brighter than ever. Jake stood in front of the assembly table, his body still trembling with the weight of his words. His chest rose and fell with each deep breath he took, but he didn't break his gaze from the alien leaders. Grace, sitting next to him, gave him a small, supportive smile, though Jake could see the concern in her eyes. They had taken a huge risk by speaking out like that. The room was thick with tension, and he could feel the cold, accusing stares of the alien delegates pressing on him. Z-Corps, the ancient alien delegate, was the first to break the silence. His eyes narrowed, his face a mask of calm, though Jake could see the simmering anger beneath. Z-Corps' species had lived for thousands of years, and to have a young, human species speak so boldly in front of them was a blow to his pride. But instead of shouting or attacking, Z-Corps simply stood up slowly, his long, green arms folding behind his back. His voice was like gravel, deep and slow. "You overstep your bounds, human. I have heard many things about your species, but this insolence is beyond what I expected." Jake stood tall, not backing down. He had said his piece, and now there was no turning back. He glanced at Grace, who was keeping her eyes trained on Z-Corps, but there was no fear in her expression. Grace had always been calm, collected, qualities that had helped them navigate many situations like this one. Lucas, the quiet strategist, spoke next, his voice measured and calm. "Z-Corps, we didn't come here to beg for your approval. We came here to prove that humanity has a place in this galaxy. If you cannot respect that, then perhaps you aren't ready to deal with us." There was a slight pause before Z-Corps spoke again. "You speak of respect, but respect must be earned, not demanded. You are young, untested. You have much to learn." He waved his hand dismissively, as if brushing aside the entire human race with one simple motion. "Your place in the galaxy is not yet decided. You still have to prove that you can handle the weight of the stars." Jake's hands clenched into fists. He was angry, more angry than he had been in a long time. But he knew this wasn't the time to let his emotions control him. He had to keep calm, keep the pressure on these arrogant beings. "We've already proven ourselves," Jake said, his voice firm. "We've faced the worst and come out on top. We've survived things that would have destroyed others. We don't need to prove anything to you." The other delegates exchanged looks. Some seemed shocked by Jake's boldness, while others appeared more amused. But Jake didn't care about their reactions. He was here to make a point, to show them that humanity wasn't some fragile species that could be pushed around by the older, more powerful aliens. One of the delegates, a creature with multiple arms and a face that looked like a mix between a reptile and a bird, stood up and sneered at Jake. "You talk about survival, human, but survival alone does not make you worthy. You fought wars, but so have many other species. You've conquered planets, but so have countless others. Your species is nothing special." Jake's eyes flicked to Grace and Lucas. They knew what he was thinking. It wasn't just about the wars, the battles, or the planets they had conquered. It was about something more, something that none of these aliens understood. It was about humanity's ability to adapt, to grow stronger in the face of adversity, and to never back down from a challenge. That was something none of the other species could claim. "You're right," Jake said, his voice growing colder. "We've fought wars, we've conquered planets, but we've also rebuilt, learned from our mistakes, and become better with each challenge we face. We're not perfect, but we're constantly evolving. That's something you can't take away from us." There was a slight pause as the room seemed to absorb Jake's words. The aliens, who had once looked at humanity with scorn, now looked at them with something else, curiosity, maybe even doubt. It wasn't much, but it was a start. For a moment, the room fell into silence again. Jake could feel the weight of the aliens' eyes on him, each one trying to figure out if humanity was a real threat or just a nuisance. But before anyone could say anything else, the doors to the assembly hall swung open with a loud bang. The human delegation wasn't the only one present. There were also members of the Galactic Council, beings from various other planets, waiting in the hallway. But the way they entered now was different. There was a sense of purpose behind their movements, as if they knew something had changed. Captain Jake Carter wasn't sure what had caused this sudden shift, but he wasn't about to back down now. The doors were wide open, and he could see the looks of surprise and suspicion on the faces of the alien leaders. They were used to having control, used to being the ones who decided what would happen next. But the humans had taken that control away from them, if only for a moment. "We're not leaving," Jake said quietly, but the words rang out like thunder in the silence. He turned to Grace and Lucas. "We've made our point." Grace looked at him, her face calm but her eyes full of determination. "Yes, we've made our point, but there's still more to say." Lucas nodded, his gaze shifting to the alien leaders. "This isn't over, not by a long shot. We've shown them that we're not afraid to stand our ground. Now we need to show them that we're capable of more than they ever imagined." Jake couldn't help but agree. The tension in the room was palpable, but for the first time since they had entered, he felt like they were on equal footing. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but they had underestimated the wrong species. "We came here to prove that we belong," Jake said, turning to face the room of alien delegates. "And we will prove it. If you can't accept that, then maybe we'll just have to show you." The alien leaders remained silent, but Jake could see the doubt in their eyes. They weren't sure how to respond, and that was enough. For the first time, humanity had planted a seed of uncertainty in their minds. They didn't know what the humans were capable of, but they were about to find out. Just then, another alien leader stood up. She was small compared to the others, but her presence was strong. Her skin shimmered like glass, and her eyes were sharp, full of intelligence and wisdom. "Perhaps," she said, her voice calm but firm, "we have been too quick to judge." Jake's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The first real sign that things were changing. The room quieted even more as the alien leader continued. "The humans have shown courage, and courage is something we can all respect," she said. "Maybe it is time to reconsider our approach. Perhaps the galaxy can learn something from them after all." Jake felt a rush of relief flood through him, but he didn't let it show. He nodded slowly. "We're here to contribute," he said simply. "And if you're willing to listen, we'll prove that humanity has something valuable to offer." The alien leader nodded. "We will listen," she said. As the delegates began to speak among themselves, Jake felt a sense of victory. It wasn't over yet, but this was a start. The humans had made their presence known, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. The assembly wasn't over, but it didn't matter. Humanity had taken its first step into a new era, and nothing would ever be the same again. The room was still, the weight of the silence pressing down on the gathered delegates. Jake stood tall, his gaze steady as the alien leaders muttered among themselves. The once overwhelming arrogance of the room had been replaced by a tense, cautious energy. For the first time since they had entered the assembly hall, humanity had their attention. Jake felt a strange sense of pride rise within him, but he knew the battle wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The alien delegate who had spoken, the one with the glassy skin and sharp eyes, stood in front of the assembly table now. She was shorter than most of the others, but there was no doubt that she held power. Her presence was magnetic, as though every word she spoke carried weight. "It seems we have underestimated the humans," she said. "You have shown us something we did not expect, strength and conviction. However, strength alone does not guarantee peace." Jake met her gaze. He knew what she was trying to say. The galaxy was a dangerous place. To survive, they would need more than just courage. They would need alliances, strategies, and the ability to navigate the complicated web of politics that came with being part of the galactic community. "We understand that," Jake said, his voice calm. "We're not here to disrupt the balance of the galaxy. We're here to be part of it." The alien leader nodded, her sharp eyes assessing him carefully. "Then let us see what you have to offer." "Words are cheap and promises even cheaper. Show us that humanity can be trusted. Prove to us that you can work with the galaxy, not against it." Jake's heart raced. He had been prepared for a challenge, but this was different. This wasn't a battle in space or a war of resources. This was about trust, something that could take years to build but could be lost in an instant. He glanced at Grace and Lucas, both of them waiting for him to respond. The pressure was on, but Jake wasn't going to back down now. "We can show you," Jake said, his voice firm. "We've already proven ourselves in the toughest of circumstances. We've faced enemies both within and beyond our borders, and we've come out stronger every time. If you give us a chance, we will prove that humanity is worthy of being a part of this council." The room grew quieter as the alien delegates exchanged glances. The challenge had been thrown down, and now it was up to the humans to follow through on their words. There was no turning back now. After a long pause, the delegate with the glassy skin spoke again. "We will test your resolve. There is a mission that requires the cooperation of many species, a mission that could determine the future of this galaxy. If you can prove yourselves in this task, we will see you as equals. Fail, and you will never be trusted again." Jake's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. He had to prove that humanity wasn't just talk. They were ready to take on whatever the galaxy could throw at them. "Tell me about this mission," he said, his voice steady. The alien leader's eyes narrowed, as though assessing Jake's seriousness. "There is a planet in a distant sector. It has been in turmoil for centuries, with multiple factions fighting for control. We believe the situation is escalating, and if it isn't handled, it could lead to a war that will engulf the entire region. It is a delicate situation, requiring a team of skilled negotiators and diplomats from various species." Jake nodded. "And you want us to help resolve this conflict?" "Yes," she replied. "But this is not a simple peacekeeping mission. It will require diplomacy, strategy, and the ability to work with beings you have never met before. We will be watching closely. If you succeed, you will have earned your place at the table. If you fail, we will consider your species too dangerous to be trusted." The weight of her words hung in the air. Jake looked at Grace and Lucas. This was it. The challenge had been set, and there was no turning back. He had no illusions about how difficult this mission would be. Negotiating peace between multiple factions was never easy, especially when those factions had been at war for centuries. But if humanity wanted to earn the respect they deserved, they had no choice but to take on this challenge. "We accept the mission," Jake said, his voice unwavering. The alien leader nodded, a small but satisfied smile crossing her face. "Good. You have shown us that you have courage. Now you will need to show us that you have wisdom." As Jake, Grace, and Lucas left the assembly hall, the weight of the mission ahead of them began to sink in. They had been given a chance, perhaps the only chance they would ever get, to prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. There was no room for failure. Jake felt the pressure on his shoulders, but he wasn't afraid. This was the opportunity they had been fighting for. They would do whatever it took to make sure humanity's place in the galaxy was secured. The journey to the planet, called Ryler, would take several days, and during that time, Jake and his team worked tirelessly to prepare. They studied the history of the factions on Ryler, learning everything they could about their customs, their grievances, and their leaders. They knew that diplomacy was key, and every word, every gesture would have to be carefully chosen. Grace took the lead in organizing their strategy. She had always been the calm one, the one who thought ahead, and Jake knew she would be invaluable in navigating the complex negotiations that awaited them. Lucas, as always, kept a close eye on the details, analyzing every potential move and countermove the factions might make. As they prepared to land on Ryler, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of nervous excitement. This was what he had trained for. This was what humanity had been preparing for. He was leading them into uncharted territory, but he knew they were ready. They had survived worse before. They would survive this. The shuttle descended through Ryler's atmosphere, and Jake could see the rugged landscape below. The planet was a mix of rocky plains and dense forests, with towering mountains that stretched high into the sky. There were no cities here, only scattered settlements, many of which were heavily fortified. It was a world in turmoil, but that didn't scare Jake. It only fueled his determination. As they landed, a delegation from Ryler greeted them. The Rylorians were tall and lean, with silver-gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the sun. Their eyes were large, almost insect-like, and their facial features were sharp and angular. They watched the humans carefully, their expressions unreadable. Jake stepped off the shuttle first, followed by Grace and Lucas. The air on Ryler was thin, and Jake could feel the weight of it in his lungs, but he didn't falter. This was where they would prove themselves. They would show the galaxy that humanity had something to offer, something the galaxy couldn't afford to ignore. The Rylorian leader, a tall figure with silver hair and piercing eyes, stepped forward. "Welcome to Ryler," she said, her voice calm and measured. "You are here to help us, but I warn you, this will not be easy. We have lived through centuries of conflict. What makes you think you can bring peace?" Jake met her gaze and stood tall. "Because we have something none of the other species have. We have the will to fight for what's right, even when the odds are against us, and we will do whatever it takes to bring peace to your people." The Rylorian leader studied him for a long moment before nodding. "We will see if your words match your actions." Jake knew this wouldn't be easy. The Rylorians were proud, and their distrust of outsiders ran deep. But he also knew that humanity's strength lay in their ability to adapt, to push forward even when faced with impossible odds. This was their moment, and they would rise to the challenge. As the human delegation prepared to enter the heart of Ryler's capital city, Jake felt the weight of the task ahead of him. This was more than just a mission. This was the future of humanity in the galaxy. And he wasn't going to let it slip away. Jake stood at the edge of the Rylorian capital, the view in front of him both awe-inspiring and unsettling. The city was a strange blend of nature and technology. Towering spires made of metal and glass reached up into the sky, while the ground below was covered in thick green vegetation. It was a beautiful world, but one that had been scarred by years of war and conflict. The signs of the constant fighting were everywhere. Barricades, defensive structures, and watchtowers lined the streets, some still smoking from recent battles. Despite the tense atmosphere, Jake didn't feel fear. He had been in the heat of battle before. What worried him now was something else, the responsibility he carried. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. The Rylorians had given them a chance, but it was a fragile chance. If they failed, everything humanity had worked for could be shattered. Grace stood beside him, her eyes scanning the city as she took in the landscape. "We have to be careful here, Jake. This isn't just a war between two factions. This is a war for control, and everyone here is looking for an edge." Jake nodded. He knew Grace's concerns were valid. The Rylorian factions had been fighting for so long that it had become second nature to them. Trust was hard to come by, and many saw outsiders as nothing more than tools to further their own agendas. If humanity was going to play a part in this, they had to prove they weren't just another power-hungry group trying to take control. "Let's meet with the Rylorian leaders," Jake said. "We'll see where we stand." The delegation led them into the heart of the city. The streets were eerily quiet, with only the occasional movement of people behind closed windows or in dark alleyways. As they approached the central square, Jake saw the first signs of the factions that had caused so much damage. One side of the square was lined with soldiers in heavy armor, their weapons slung across their backs, their eyes wary and watchful. On the other side, a group of civilians gathered, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. Jake's heart went out to them. The Rylorians had been caught in a never-ending cycle of violence, and it seemed as if no one was willing to break it. But the humans were here now. They had to find a way to put an end to it, to offer a solution that the Rylorians could trust. The Rylorian leader, a woman named Lyra, greeted them at the center of the square. Her silver-gray skin shimmered in the light, and her sharp features gave her an air of authority. She was tall and graceful, moving with the ease of someone who had seen much in her long life. "I welcome you to Ryler," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. "I hope you understand the gravity of the situation here. You are not just visitors. You are part of a delicate dance, one that requires patience and skill." Jake met her gaze, his expression serious. "We understand. We didn't come here to make things worse. We came to help." Lyra nodded, but there was a flicker of doubt in her eyes. "Then prove it. Your species claims to have wisdom and strength, but you have never faced a conflict like this. The factions here have been fighting for generations. Trust will not come easily." Jake's mind raced as he thought about the challenge ahead. He knew Lyra was right. The Rylorians had been divided for so long that it seemed impossible for them to come together again. But humanity had always found a way to overcome the impossible. It was in their nature. "We'll start by listening," Jake said. "We'll listen to each faction's concerns, their fears, and then we'll work together to find a way forward. It won't be easy, but it's the only way." Lyra seemed to consider this for a moment before nodding. "Very well. I will arrange a meeting with the leaders of the factions, but be warned, these are not negotiators. These are warriors, each with their own agenda. They will not be easy to sway." "We're used to difficult situations," Grace said, her voice steady. "We've been through worse." With that, the group made their way to the meeting hall, a large structure at the center of the city. The walls were made of thick, dark stone, and the doors were reinforced with metal. As they entered, they were met by a group of Rylorian leaders, each one exuding a sense of power and authority. Some of them were tall and broad, while others were lean and wiry. Their eyes were sharp, calculating, and none of them looked pleased to see humans in their midst. One of the leaders, a tall male with deep blue skin, spoke first. "So, you're the humans who think they can solve our problems. Do you have any idea what it's like to live in a constant state of war? Do you think you can just waltz in and make everything better?" Jake met the leader's gaze, his voice calm but firm. "We don't think we can solve everything, but we can help. We've fought our own battles. We know what it's like to live through war. We know what it's like to want peace." The blue-skinned leader sneered. "You're all the same. You come in pretending to understand, but you have no idea. We've been fighting for so long that we've forgotten what peace even looks like. You think you can just offer us a solution and expect us to follow?" Grace stepped forward, her eyes locked on the leader. "We're not asking you to follow. We're asking you to work with us. We'll listen to your concerns and we'll help you find a way forward. But it has to be together. If you keep fighting, you'll destroy each other and nothing will change." The room fell silent for a moment as the words hung in the air. Jake could see that the Rylorians were unsure how to respond. They had been entrenched in their conflict for so long that they didn't know how to trust anyone anymore. It was up to the humans to change that. Finally, the blue-skinned leader spoke again, his voice softer now. "I'm not saying I agree with you, but maybe you're right. We can't keep fighting forever." Jake nodded, grateful for the small victory. "That's all we ask, a chance to talk, to find common ground." Over the next several hours, the human delegation listened to the Rylorians. They heard about the pain, the distrust, and the deep divisions that had plagued the planet for centuries. But they also heard about the hope that remained, the desire for peace that still flickered in the hearts of many. Jake knew they weren't going to solve everything in one meeting, but this was a start. The Rylorians had agreed to come to the table to at least listen. That was a breakthrough, something he hadn't expected so soon. As the meeting drew to a close, Lyra stood and addressed the room. "You have given us something to think about, humans. We will meet again tomorrow, but this time we will come with open minds. We will listen, and we will see if your solution can bring us closer to peace." Jake stood, his heart pounding with a mix of relief and excitement. They had made it this far, now they had to finish what they started. "Thank you," Jake said, his voice sincere. "We'll be here working with you for as long as it takes." As they left the meeting hall, Grace and Lucas exchanged looks. The road ahead would be long, but Jake could see the first signs of hope. Humanity had made its mark, and the Rylorians had seen something in them they hadn't expected, a willingness to listen, to work together, and to fight for peace. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time, Jake felt like they were on the right path. Together, they could do this.